Can you imagine what it would be like to lose from one day to the next? What defines you? What made you recognized all over the world? StevePerry, the immortal voice of the band Journey, experienced this pain firsthand. The legend, who for decades moved millions with songs like Don't Stop Believin', was silenced by a turn of events that no one expected. The man who seemed invincible suddenly couldn't sing even in the shower. And what caused this was not just an illness, but an accumulation of battles that he faced in silence. Maybe you are going through something like this too, carrying a gift, a dream, or a purpose, but feeling like you are losing strength. And this is where this story connects with yours. Because Steve didn't just disappear from the stage. He needed to find himself again as a human being. He needed to understand that his value was not only in the voice that the world applauded, but in the heart that continued to beat, even in silence. And that changes everything. Because when pain arrives, it seems to want to erase who we are. But the truth is that sometimes it is in silence that God works to rebuild us. And if you're feeling defeated today, listen to this. Your voice may have failed, your brilliance may have dimmed in the eyes of others, but your value remains intact. Your story is not over yet. Just as Steve needed to retreat to heal, perhaps this is his moment of pause, not the end. Because what truly defines you is not what you lost, but what you choose to rebuild. Then take a deep breath out and continue. Your strength is being honed now. Have you ever imagined waking up one day and realizing that the only thing that defined you simply disappeared? That voice that for decades enchanted crowds, moved generations and crossed borders suddenly became silent. Stay with me until the end, because what you discover now may surprise you. Long before the grand stages, the lights and the crowds shouting his name, there was only one boy, an ordinary boy from a small town called Hanford, California. Shy, introspective, but with something inside him that no one could explain. It was as if every note he sang carried a piece of the world's soul, and it was his mother who was the first to notice. My son has a voice that is unusual. StevePerry didn't start his career surrounded by applause. The path to fame was built with much more silence than recognition. While the other kids thought about sports, cars, and fun, Steve spent hours listening to the radio with his mother. There, amidst the voices of the great singers of the time, he lost himself and found himself at the same time. Music chose him, and at a very young age he decided he would face anything to make his voice heard. Have you ever felt like you were born with something special, but the whole world seemed to want to shut you up? It was facing closed doors, criticism, and a relentless market that Steve learned to resist. Each no pushed him further. Each apparent failure hid a seed of preparation, until, like one of those moments that changes everything, the big turning point happened. He joined a band that was about to become a global phenomenon, Journey. From then on, the music would no longer be the same. With the band came eternal hits, Don't Stop Believin', Open Arms, Faithfully, songs that to this day bring tears, smiles, and memories from those who lived at that time, and from those who discovered it later. StevePerry wasn't just the band's lead singer. He was the voice, the soul behind the lyrics, the heart beating in each chorus. You may not even realize it, but you may have sung one of these songs at a defining moment in your life. A meeting, a farewell, a journey, a new beginning. Because that's what Steve's voice did. It didn't just touch the ear, it touched the memory. She became part of your story too. And that's why everything that happened afterwards was so shocking. Because when someone who was born to sing falls silent, the silence echoes louder than any note. But before reaching that point, you need to understand who he really was. Because behind the fame, the perfect voice, and the worldwide success, there was someone deeply human, with fears, losses, and a constant search for meaning. This is the story of a legend, but it is also a story about persistence, about gifts that cannot be ignored, and about the price that is often paid for carrying a talent that moves the world. And now that you know the beginning of this journey, get ready, because in the next few minutes you will discover how everything has changed, and why that voice that seemed eternal was suddenly silenced, and why that voice that seemed eternal was suddenly silenced. And perhaps at this point in the story you have already remembered someone, from an artist who marked his life, from a song that healed you without you understanding how, or even a moment of yours when your own voice also needed to be silent, inside, even if no one noticed. If this topic makes sense to you, leave here in the comments what has touched you most so far. It could be a memory, a song that marked your life, or even an opinion about Steve's journey. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content. If you can, leave your like too. It seems simple, but it's your click that shows YouTube that this story has value and deserves to be shared with those who also need to hear it. And if you feel that this type of content really connects with you, subscribe to the channel so you help me to continue bringing stories that move, inspire, and make us remember that behind every legend, there is a human being trying not to give up. Now, come back to this story with me because the most unexpected part is yet to come. But what seemed to be a journey of eternal glory, filled with applause, awards, and songs that became true anthems for entire generations, began to bend in the face of silent pain. StevePerry, at the height of his fame, still smiled on stage, still delivered each note as if it were his last. But inside, something was breaking. He was no longer that kid from Hanford with his eyes shining with hope. The tiredness came from within, from a place that fame couldn't touch and that fans couldn't see. The physical pain started discreetly. An inconvenience here, another there, but they soon became part of the routine. In the early 1990s, he discovered he had a rare hip disease. And while everyone looked at the glitter, the costumes, the microphones, and the crowds, Steve was already fighting an intense battle with his own body, a fight that made no noise, but that carried a gigantic weight. It was as if his body had decided to slow down a mind that just wanted to move forward. Still, he tried. He fought. He went on stage even though he was in pain, because he knew there were thousands of people waiting for him. He understood the impact of his presence, how much that voice made a difference in the lives of so many people. But there was a limit, and it came, because it wasn't just the hip that hurt, it was the emotional, the mind, the psychological, what no one could see, and what started as pain in the body turned into silence in the soul. Few people understand what it's like to live trapped between two realities. On the one hand, the public image, the idol, the legendary lead singer of Journey, the man who carried crowds with a single note. On the other, the real man, tired, frustrated, trying to understand the reason for so much exhaustion. This is the behind the scenes that no one sees. When the gift that took you to the top becomes a burden. When what you love to do starts to hurt you. And the consequence was devastating. Steve began to lose his voice. Not all at once, as if it were a sudden cut, but in pieces. A high pitch that no longer came out like before. A breath that failed. A note that was out of tune. For someone like him, this wasn't just worrying. It was almost unbearable. How does someone who was born to sing just stop? It's at this point that the story stops being just about music and starts talking about identity. Because Steve wasn't just a singer, he was the voice. And when that voice began to fail, everything he believed about himself was called into doubt. Who would he be without singing? What is the value of his journey if he could no longer continue in the same way? These questions have no easy answers. But it is these hidden truths which live in the silence behind the scenes that show us how human this journey was and painfully real. When he decided to step away from the stage completely, the music world didn't understand. There was no official statement, there was no cinematic farewell, there was only silence. And silence, when it comes from someone who has always been a voice, hurts more than the sound of goodbye. Steve disappeared. He isolated himself, and many came to believe that he would never return. But behind this silence, there was much more than tiredness or giving up. There was mourning, there was wear and tear, there was a sense of loss, not just of his career, but of an essential part of himself. StevePerry's break was not just a professional break, it was an internal collapse, a forced invitation to introspection, a journey inward that not even he expected to have to face. It's funny how sometimes big breakups happen in silence. No drama, no scandals, only with the weight of what can no longer be sustained. And that's what the world didn't see, how much this decision cost, because to the public, he just disappeared. But inside him, the Steve everyone knew was fighting not to disappear too. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what happened behind the scenes of this decision goes beyond music. It goes beyond your career. It touches on delicate points about purpose, about identity, about what we do when everything that defined us no longer belongs to us. If you've come this far and something inside you connects with this story, write in the comments, "I heard this silence." This shows that you are living this journey together with me. and can make more people feel accompanied in this conversation too. The pain that invaded Steve's body was not just physical, but penetrated to the depths of his soul, transforming a brilliant trajectory into a sea of uncertainty. With each note that was no longer formed correctly, the anguish intensified, causing the man behind the icon to find himself faced with choices that no one ever imagined having to face. For years, the impact of this silent condition slowly grew, shaping a new mentality where the beauty of the voice was confronted with the harsh reality of wear and tear on the body and mind. Amid this internal struggle, what was once seen as just a physical ailment revealed a hidden truth: the vulnerability inherent in fame and talent. Each performance turned into a ritual full of meaning, where the pressure of enchanting crowds collided with the weight of difficult and painful decisions, which seemed to be part of an implacable destiny. The backstage of his success, until then covered in glamour and applause, turned into a scene where shouts of encouragement mixed with the profound silence of solitary moments. The transformation was not just external, but intimate, a process of self-analysis that forced Steve to face his own essence and rethink what really mattered on his journey. There were nights when the man who enchanted the world felt that his own voice was betraying him, that every attempt to regain his lost vigor was a battle against the limitations imposed by his body. Amid this whirlwind of emotions and revelations, the media focused on the mystery surrounding his health, and the public, eager for answers, could hardly believe that one of music's greatest artists had subjugated himself to this devastating silence. In this scenario, the impact of the disease transcended the personal sphere, also affecting the collective perception of what it means to be a living legend. The raw reality, permeated with suffering and resignation, contrasted with the radiant image he had cultivated over the years. Behind the glitter of the stage, the backstage hid an internal battle that no one could have imagined. Every step, every gesture was charged with an almost palpable tension, a duality that the spotlight did not reveal. Anxiety, the fear of failure, the fear that pain would turn into eternal silence were constant companions. This journey of uncertainty forced a change in perspective. Personal transformation has become as crucial as maintaining one's career, and decisions that once seemed simple now have immeasurable weight. And in a game of contrasts, the voice that had once echoed with all its intensity began to give way to a more restrained timbre, marked by the scars of a struggle that few dared to see. StevePerry's trajectory, which began with the charm of a promising voice, unfolded into a drama full of conflicting emotions, where each moment of glory was followed by a portion of pain and resignation. This duality, full of hidden truths, questioned the very essence of what it means to belong to the world of music and the expectations of an audience that lived their most intense moments through their songs. The silence that ensued was not just the absence of sound, but the manifestation of a profound change in the artist's mentality, who had to reinvent his sense of identity and purpose. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, exploring the internal transformations that occur when the body and mind collapse. We can see how sometimes the greatest icons face challenges that escape superficial understanding. What seemed like a linear trajectory of success revealed a tortuous path, where the impact of physical and emotional conditions became intertwined with the essence of the career itself. It is at this point that the journey becomes a true lesson about resilience, about the ability to transform pain into learning, and about how the decisions we make in moments of crisis shape not only our history, but also the world's perception of us. As the hidden truth behind this dramatic silence begins to unfold, the narrative is enriched with each revelation and each behind-the-scenes detail of one of the most difficult moments in Steve's career. It is impossible to dissociate the story of the legend from the context in which it is inserted, an era full of expectations where the voice had the power to elevate souls and transform lives. Behind each verse sung, there was a silent struggle that rarely gained the spotlight, but that, little by little, showed the high price of true passion for art. This reality, which many prefer to ignore, reveals how fragile even the grandest dreams are, and how a transformation can begin deep within each human being, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable adversities. If you've made it this far, truly, thank you for walking with me through this very human and profound story. I know it wasn't just about Steve. At some point, you also found yourself somewhere along the way. And that's what makes this type of content so important. It touches where we feel, and not just where we hear. If this message reached you in any way, leave it here in the comments. This message was for me, so I know that you stayed until the end. And more than that this story made sense to you. If you can, leave your like too. This helps a lot to keep this space alive and full of stories that really matter. And if you want to continue receiving content like this, full of meaning, subscribe to the channel. There's a lot of good stuff to come. Oh, and it's not going away now. There's a video here that complements everything we said. Click on it and stay with me there. The conversation is not over yet.